The single dumbest conspiracy theory in the entire world. The single dumbest conspiracy theory in the entire world is that every major humanitarian institution on Earth is conspiring to falsely frame Israel for the crime of genocide. And yet, believing this batshit insane conspiracy theory is the only way to think it's not a genocide. There is no other way to claim that there is no genocide happening in Gaza without treating this self-evidently ridiculous theory as true. In order to believe that there is no genocide in Gaza, you need to accept it as a given that the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory is conspiring to frame Israel for this crime. You also need to believe that the International Association of Genocide Scholars is in on the conspiracy. You also need to believe the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem is in on the conspiracy. You also need to believe that Physicians for Human Rights Israel, another Israeli organization, is in on the conspiracy. You also need to believe that Amnesty International is in on the conspiracy. You also need to believe that Doctors Without Borders are in on the conspiracy. You also need to accept that Human Rights Watch are in on the conspiracy. You also need to accept that the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights is in on the conspiracy. You also need to accept that the International Federation for Human Rights is in on the conspiracy. You also need to believe that the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention is in on the conspiracy. You also need to believe the conspiracy is so widespread and pervasive that there exists not a single major human rights group which holds that Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza. You need to believe this conspiracy goes all the way to the top. Toward what end are these institutions conspiring to deceive the world into thinking that the innocent, virtuous state of Israel is guilty of these heinous crimes? Well, that's where the theory part of conspiracy theory comes in. You need to have some reason why all these groups would be working together to trick everyone into thinking Israel is committing genocide. Cui bono, as they say in conspiracy circles. If you press the average Israel defender to explain why all these institutions would be lying about Israel's actions in Gaza, you will eventually get them to admit that their theory is that all these institutions secretly hate Jews, that it's a giant anti-Semitic conspiracy designed to discredit the Israeli state and make Jewish people feel sad. I defy you to find me a dumber conspiracy theory than this. There's nothing that can possibly compete. QAnon, Flat Earth, reptilians, they all seem fairly reasonable in comparison to this demented nonsense. They're certainly a lot less harmful. They're a lot less harmful because they're not being used to justify an ongoing genocide, and because they're not being promoted by the most powerful people in the world. All the major Western powers who've refused to acknowledge that we are looking at a genocide in Gaza subscribe to the dumb conspiracy theory in question. All the mass media institutions who frame genocide as an unfounded accusation rather than an established fact verified by the overwhelming consensus of the world's relevant experts necessarily subscribe to the world's dumbest conspiracy theory as well. It's the dumbest conspiracy theory in the world, but it's also the mainstream narrative. It's what our governments and our media tell us is reality. They're a bunch of tinfoil hat-wearing crackpots, and they rule the world. The Western Empire is the craziest, most murderous, most deceitful, and most dangerous power structure on Earth, and it is only getting more so. Which is why the narratives we're being asked to believe are getting dumber and dumber by the year.